Is Donald Trump democratically elected? Sure enough, but with charges of wrongdoing in that election. Exactly 1 year ago, Donald Trump's approval ratings fell to 35%, as the Washington Post reported. He is not the first president to touch those lows, but he did it without there being a war, without a Watergate-like scandal in America, or economic dislocation. In fact, the US economy is doing well, which is something that Trump touts as sufficient reason to impose import duties on China and other countries. But take a look at the White House under Donald Trump. A rash of departures has led to speculation about who could fill them. There is no word from the president, resulting in his advisors floating their own choices. There is absolute chaos. This has exacerbated the divisions within the White House between hard right conservatives and more moderate voices, creating an atmosphere of friction and backbiting. Is the Mueller investigation into Russian meddling in the US elections taking its toll on the president, is a question many ask. What about porn star Stormy Daniels suing Donald Trump? There's also son-in-law Jared Kushner seeking investment from Qatar for his father's property. It seems there's a very thin line dividing Trump's presidency from his business. Many say that Kushner and Ivanka should leave the White House now. Then there's a constant skirmish between the Chief of Staff, John Kelly, and Kushner over security clearances. In the meantime, Trump's decision to meet North Korea's Kim Jong-un has triggered another controversy, with many saying that it's not proper for the president of the US to meet the leader of an outlawed regime. But Donald Trump is not known to listen, or for that matter, even read up his briefs on foreign policy. What's more, he seems more intent on running for his next campaign 3 years from now, rather than running the government right now. They're doing so to drive home the contrast. And that's where India comes in. Does Narendra Modi fit in this pantheon of dictators? Logically, he does not, because he's a freely elected leader of a democracy. While regarded as a strong leader driven by a vision of India and less willing to compromise, Modi has been able to raise the bar in terms of what the public can expect of a politician. By all accounts, he works 24/7, he rarely takes a vacation, he travels extensively, he is known to get involved in detailed planning of the itinerary of visiting international leaders. He's raised India's international profile. The world is taking notice when India stands up. When India stood up to China during the Doklam standoff last year, it made international headlines. And then again, when India boycotted China's celebration of One Belt, One Road, that's a project India has refused to join despite the pressure. Narendra Modi tends to centralize power in the Prime Minister's office. Under him, the PMO functions as a mini secretariat, overseeing key decisions in practically every ministry. That may leave his ministers out on a limb, but none complain. Modi is the first Prime Minister to speak out on how Indians live and behave. And that's very, very significant, a significant part of his politics. He kicked off the Swachh Bharat campaign, determined that Indians must not live in squalor, must be educated about hygiene. The only way to go about this is to talk about it publicly. He's been critical of how Indians treat their young, especially the girls, the discrimination they face. Hence the Beti Bachao campaign launched by the PM. Despite the constraints of a democracy, he has helmed key economic reforms. Demonetization, for one, was messaged as a blow against black money. The goods and services tax, or GST, was driven by the vision of one Indian market. Digital India was to propel India into the internet age. Make in India is intended to boost manufacturing and create jobs. This is all work in progress, of course. It has been hamstrung by the missed opportunities of the past. He abolished the Planning Commission, but the Niti Aayog is yet to come into its own. The process of getting government out of the business of running PSUs, public sector undertakings, is yet to take off in any meaningful way. Perhaps the privatization of Air India will show the way. Narendra Modi is yet to begin reform of the bureaucracy or transform the manner in which defence and strategic planning is done in this country. To Modi's advantage is the disarray the opposition is in and the lack of any credible leader with a national image. Narendra Modi has time to reform and transform India. He's a global voice, and all of this without the dictatorial advantages of his global peers. Developments, rather, in that country are being closely watched here in New Delhi. The most obvious question is, what does Xi Jinping's consolidation of power mean for India? Indian diplomats and security analysts suspect that Xi Jinping's outlook towards India could have similarities to the Mao Zedong rule. This means that the Chinese leadership could portray friendly ties with the Indian government for the cameras, but behind the scenes there could be more provocations. One can expect intensified pressure on India's border. The Chinese troops would step up psychological warfare over the Doklam Plateau. China would continue to woo India's neighbours, offering them strategic inducements like money and technology. Xi Jinping would now like to push the Belt and Road Initiative. The Chinese would attempt to make greater inroads into countries like the Maldives, Sri Lanka, Nepal and Myanmar. To defend its core interests, India will have to maneuver sharply. India may draw clear red lines which China should not cross. But Xi Jinping may be more inclined to push the envelope. To put a convincing challenge, India will have to beef up its economic and military capabilities. Extra effort will be required to win over the neighbourhood through timely implementation of promises. But on the plus side, it's better to work with the devil you know. India has come to understand what Xi Jinping wants, how he operates. So the longer he stays in power, the easier it will be for people in the MEA, for people in South Bloc to understand what to expect from China. And while the Communist Party may have muzzled dissent at home, protests against Xi Jinping have erupted in Western universities. The posters written in Chinese and English were first seen in some American universities, and over the weekend they were also seen in the UK, France, the Netherlands and Australia, also in Canada. These posters are in black and white, carrying messages like "Not my president" and "I disagree." They're being circulated online through social media platforms. A report claims that this campaign is being run by Chinese university students who remain anonymous, lest they be targeted by the Chinese state machinery. Remember, the internet is heavily censored in China. Political dissent is not allowed. Those caught writing or sharing critical posts have to face harassment by Chinese officials. That's in the best case scenario. There is no saying what the worst case entails. Thousands of farmers who had converged into the city of Mumbai have called off their protest today. This was after the Chief Minister of Maharashtra, Devendra Fadnavis, agreed to most of their demands. The state government buckled after more than 35,000 farmers reached Mumbai today, the financial capital of India. They walked more than 180 kilometers for 6 days from Nashik, which is another town in Maharashtra, despite the scorching sun, blistered and cracked feet and irregular meals. What they wanted was this: an unconditional loan waiver and better prices for their produce. They said that the state government had promised this last year and should deliver now. So while the immediate crisis may have been diffused, the larger challenge remains. For those who've grown up in India, they would be familiar with this: Jai Jawan, Jai Kisan. Hail the soldier, hail the farmer. It was a term coined by India's former Prime Minister Lal Bahadur Shastri in the 60s. 70% of India's population lived in rural areas. In socialist India, they kept the grain silos full. They fed those who were slowly trickling into the country's big cities. But this is 2018, and India is now an emerging global economy and superpower. The state of India's farmers has undergone a sea change, and it's certainly not for the better. Senior foreign editor Padma Rao looks back in time, around the world, and at the future of India's farmers.
The statistics are impressive. India ranks second worldwide in farm output. Agriculture and related fields like fisheries and foresting account for nearly 15% of India's GDP. India is the 7th largest exporter of agricultural products, and nearly 50% of India's total workforce works the soil somewhere in the vast country. But the reality on the ground is dismaying. Agriculture's contribution to India's GDP has been on a steady decline, even as India's economy grows in leaps and bounds. And that, in turn, has led to a heart-rending trend: suicides by India's farmers, the salt of its earth and once the apples of all Indian eyes. India began liberalizing its economy in the early 90s. Barely 10 years later, farmers began taking their own lives. In Maharashtra, the site of the current protests alone, more than 23,000 farmers have committed suicide to date. But what are the reasons for this depressing trend? The reasons for India's impoverished subsistence farmers taking their own lives is long. Water is diverted by richer and more influential farmers from canals, leading to the failure of smaller crops. Some farmers try to save their meagre incomes only to lose them to scam-ridden schemes like the ubiquitous chit fund. Family problems and age-old habits like dowry are other causes. And in a country with very scant penetration of free public health services, chronic illnesses can be impossibly expensive to treat. Then there's the debt burden, usually from unscrupulous moneylenders and at exorbitant interest rates. But when the borewell the money was borrowed for fails and the harassment by those moneylenders begins, thousands of desperate farmers take the only way out that is available to them: suicide. Farmers' suicides occur elsewhere in the world too. Studies in Sri Lanka, the United States, Canada, England and Australia have shown that small-scale farmers in those countries face high levels of stress. And yet farmers in, say, the United States are far better off than their counterparts in India. There are only 2.3 million farmers in the United States, while in India there are 120 million. Farms in the States are huge, approximately 250 hectares, while a small Indian farmer usually inherits his farmland, which isn't much larger than 2.3 hectares. Farmers in the States are educated and even specialized in agriculture-related disciplines, while a lack of public schools in most of India's villages and bad connector roads means that most Indian farmers have not made it beyond primary school. The United States' farmer has access to and uses modern technology with ease. The Indian farmer has no knowledge of such technology, even if he were to gain access. It's the same with irrigation. Unlike the American farmer, his Indian counterpart is largely dependent on the monsoon and the vagaries of weather, which can often make his crops fail. The American farmer can grow several crops, while the Indian farmer can at best manage 2 to 3 a year. And finally, while the lion's share of the retail price goes to the US farmer, too many middlemen in India means that farmers work the hardest but earn the least of their produce. The farmers agitating in Maharashtra right now want the government to come good on its election promise and write off their loans. Talks are on, they may achieve their goal. But what about their future? How much longer can India's farmers continue to till the earth and yet remain bitterly poor? The Prime Minister has promised to double farmers' incomes by 2022. But there are many other things the farmers should be educated and encouraged to do. India's farmers must get a better deal. They need primary health centres, schools and good roads to connect to towns for higher education, which will also help banish practices like dowry. Farmers need access to subsidized technology to improve their yields and specialized education to understand that technology. The government must take draconian measures against chit fund scams and unscrupulous moneylenders. Bank loans with the longest payback time and the lowest interest rates must be put in place for subsistence farmers. The current farm-to-retail chain is replete with unnecessary middlemen, all of whom make money off the produce. The process must be urgently reformed to eliminate them and ensure that it is the farmer who receives the major part of the retail price. And finally, it is imperative not only for the mental and physical health of India's farmers, but also for the country as a whole to encourage farmers steeped in dogmatic traditions to switch to totally new crops and overall to organic farming. It's only then that India can well and truly say, Jai Jawan, Jai Kisan, hail the soldier, hail the farmer. Padma Rao, WION.
Now to another twist in the story behind the death of senior Congress leader Shashi Tharoor's wife Sunanda Pushkar. It's a story that continues to intrigue this country. An exclusive report in WION's sister publication, the daily DNA, says Delhi police has evidence to prove that Sunanda Pushkar was indeed murdered. The new report questions the autopsy that Pushkar died of an overdose of antidepressant drugs. The DNA report states that the first police report and the inquest clearly stated that it was not a case of suicide. The report, which has now been accessed by DNA and WION, had asked the area station house officer to probe the case as murder. The report says a concrete investigation should have been conducted to prove whether the drugs were orally given or injected forcefully. This report also questions the delay in registering a case even when Delhi police had evidence to show that Pushkar's death was not natural. It then states that the body of Sunanda Pushkar had various marks believed to have been caused in a scuffle. As per a statement by Tharoor's personal attendant Narayan Singh, police believe that the marks were caused in a scuffle between the Congress MP and his wife. The autopsy report stated, and I'm quoting, "The cause of death, to the best of my knowledge and belief, in this case is poisoning. The circumstantial evidence is suggestive of alprazolam poisoning. All the injuries mentioned are caused by blunt force, simple in nature, non-contributing to death, and are produced in scuffle except injury number 10 with an injection mark. Injury number 12 is teeth bite mark. The injuries number 1 to 15 are of various durations ranging from 12 hours to 4 days. This report stated that the injection marks were fresh. It was submitted to the Range Joint Commissioner of Police Vivek Gogia and also to the then Home Minister. But police did not file a case in that matter. Even when the case was transferred to the crime branch, the official managed to get it back within 4 hours. The report notes that the top police brass delayed registration of an FIR and investigation in the case. Sunanda Pushkar was found dead in a hotel room in New Delhi on the 17th of January 2014. Shashi Tharoor had publicly affirmed that he will cooperate with the investigation.